Well, it's a great business. I don't really regret any of it. You know, people will always ask you that question, would you have done anything differently, or would you have liked to have followed a different kind of career? But I've always been a news junkie since I was a little kid. And I haven't changed very much. I get withdrawal symptoms when I'm somewhere when I can't get a hold of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal every day. But I still old-fashioned enough to read the hard copy. But I've really learned how to read things online too. So I'm not a real dinosaur. But it's a great business, and I've often said that if you're not current, you're not any good at it. So I think that my advice to young people is always to stay as current as they can be, and that's the reason I'm still at it at my ripe old age, and I still enjoy it every day, and I like the interplay with young people, and but it's changed such a great deal since I began. It was a much easier business in those days, because you could virtually reach 85–95% of the market that you wanted to reach with a couple of well-placed stories in the right publications or on network television. And today it's so diffused, it's really very, very difficult. But certain things have not changed that much. I think the need to be aware and current and be able to anticipate what the future is, I think, is very important. I like to use a metaphor of Wayne Gretzky when he was asked once, why do you consider yourself one of the great hockey players of all time? And he said something. He said, it's one thing to know where the puck is now. It's another thing to know where it's going to be. And I think that really sums up a lot of things that we have to be conscious of in our industry, that we have to be able to be predictors of the future and have the judgment to advise our companies or our clients about what they should do, what kind of actions they should take. Well, it was interesting. When we started, nobody ever heard of McDonald's. It was, they had a handful of places around the Chicago area. And so our first job was to try to get people to become franchisees before they would really be interested in helping them sell hamburgers. So that was a key factor, and then helping to obtain real estate sites, because they've become one of the great real estate owners in the world now, because one of the keys to their financial success is the ownership of real estate. And so and we got involved in a lot of things because we probably didn't know any better. We were making things up as we went along. There are very few textbooks like yours, Clark, that you could learn from. But if it felt good, we kept doing it over and over again. And one of the things we probably were pioneers in was community involvement. And it's still part of their DNA today, despite the fact that they're probably one of the top 2 or 3 brands in the world. They still feel the importance of that local franchisee and that local owner being involved in the community, because it's one thing to have great recognition. It's another, though, to believe in established trust in those communities. So we came up with I think I came up with a term called the trust bank, and which really means building up deposits of goodwill in the event that you might need it if there is a crisis or a problem along the way. And I've been very flattered in the sense that they named this Trust Bank Award for me, which is given annually to one of their franchisees who has done the most in the community. So it keeps me coming back. Yeah, I think the trust bank concept is still as important today as it was in those days, even maybe more so because of the mistrust of business, of media, of you name it, of government, of course. I think that establishing trust is probably the key factor. It's not just a nice thing to do. It makes a difference of a brand succeeding and failing. So I think the word trust is really so key. Even in the New York Times today, they had a piece on authenticity and trust, and I think it was it really drove the point home that I think people are tired of the charlatans they've seen and heard about in business and in government and whatever. And so the word trust is, as I say, is very, very important. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a radical idea, and a lot of people are questioning it, and rightly so, I think, because you know, no one likes change. I think everybody has a built-in resistance to change. But I think the time to change is when things are good. We're doing fine at our agency. I think Jack Kennedy said it, the time to fix a roof is when the sun is shining. So I've always had a favorite saying of fix it before it breaks, because I've hated that expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think we should all have the courage to change things before they need changing. So I think in this case, that's an example of what we're doing. We're changing when we don't have to change because we're doing fine. And but I think that it's very good to rock the boat and to look to the future. And I think this change really addresses that sort of thing. It takes away the hierarchy of a lot of things that agencies were so hung up on, with titles and vice president and account director and account supervisor and all that sort of thing. We've tried to break it down into various areas where people have more expertise than others, and we all can't do everything well. So we broke it down into different categories, such as strategists and connectors and catalysts and that sort of thing. And so we're now in the process now of earmarking our folks from around the world in all of our offices into these categories. And they seem to have been very receptive to this sort of thing. And I think it's an exciting new structure, and we're looking forward to implementing all that now in the next couple of months. Well, it's exciting, Clark, because in the early days when I starting the business, when things got tough in the economy, public relations was the first thing to go. And today it's very interesting. Even with a downturn in the economy, our business is doing very well, as are most of our competitors, I think. So I think there's a consciousness of the value of it that never existed before. I think our advertising brethren are feeling some problems with it, but with the advent of all this new media and all this sort of thing, there's this really big awareness from the major companies, certainly, on the need for exciting new public relations programs. Now, we had a couple of situations where at one of our long-term clients, McDonald's, when they first entered the Soviet Union, which then changed to the market economy, and our timing was really impeccable in that sense because they were changing the whole system over, and they were opening the first McDonald's in Moscow. And when we wanted to do something for the opening, we suggested they get involved with a charity and local community things, which we normally like to do for McDonald's. And the Russian partner over there said, "Oh no, that's impossible. We don't do things that way over here. Private business doesn't take care of that. The government takes care of everything." And our argument was, well, you're changing over to a market economy. Why not try to change over with everything you're doing? We think it is the right kind of timing. And we found out that people are people. They have the same emotions. I don't care where you are in the world. They have the same interest in children and things of that nature. And when we decided to give the first day's proceeds to this Russian Children's Fund, it really endeared them so much to not only the public over there, but to government officials and things. And it opened up new sites for them, and it was an example of a radical thing that we could have been talked out of. So it's one of the things that I always pride myself. Somebody once asked me, what are you the most proud of and what are you the least proud of? And I said, well, it's really the same thing. I'm the most proud of when I stuck to my guns and I knew something was the right thing to do, and we just did it. I'm the least proud of it when I was talked out of it by a lot of people who say, you know, it's never been done before, you can't do it, and that sort of thing. So it's, I think that you have to follow your gut to a great extent. This is not a science. It's maybe everybody's trying to make it a science, but I don't know if they'll ever succeed.
Well, you use a lot of research in your work.
We do.
So you pulse
We
all
do.
the time and
Oh no, we
listen
do.
to your customer and listen to the market. But you're art informed by science, I guess.
It is art. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And no, and I'm not putting down research
No.
because we do use it. I think it is very important, and but I think then in the final analysis you have to make that decision.
Right.
I think I remember meeting. We handled Sony years ago, and meeting Mr. Morita, and when he told us one day, I remember that. All their market research told them that the Walkman would never go. And he had that feeling that it would, and he stuck to it, and he really fought it through against all the judgment of their people. And so that market research didn't work in that case.
Right.
Well, yeah, we had at the time, there was a guy who was the CEO of the US division, who came up with a product that he was convinced was the biggest blockbuster product of all time, called the Arch Deluxe. And it was a sandwich that was all kinds of ingredients in it that I'm no genius necessarily on food, but I said I just didn't like the product. But anyway, he wanted the biggest introduction of this product you could ever think of. So we pulled out every stop you could think of. And when I asked him, what's your budget? He said, don't give me any budget, I don't care. You just do what you think is the right thing to do. So we had a big opening with Radio City Music Hall simultaneously with something at the Cinerama Theater in LA, and then we did a thing in London and a thing in Toronto, and it was a worldwide kind of extravaganza. The media coverage was phenomenal. You know, the operation was a success, but the patient died, you know, and it was, the people just didn't like the product. So it was one of those things that you can do only, you know, you can do so much for things, and and you can do the best job in the world, but if it doesn't, if the public doesn't want it, it's meaningless. Well, I do think that there was a guy who worked in our office, sat about 60 feet from me, and he would constantly leave me emails and voicemails and what have you. And I finally walked into his office and said, you know, I'm right next door to you. Why don't we discuss some of these things occasionally? And I think that we live in a society today where sometimes we like to get away with things and without any discussion. I like to say that there was a guy who wrote a book years ago that I always liked called Megatrends.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if you remember the book,
Of course, yeah.
old Chicago one. And he said, with all the high tech that's coming in, you have to balance it with high touch.
Right.
And I think, of course, it becomes more and more of that, you know, today. Well, I think sometimes there are a lot of public relations people who take themselves too seriously. And I think that it's always been a problem of mine. Excuse me. I think that they think they're above, you know, selling a product or service, and that there should be a little loftier and not be measurable like some of the marketing people are. So I think that's a real mistake, and I think that I found sometimes I'm not happy to go to certain public relations meetings and things because they can be a little boring and be too impressed with themselves. And I think that's why some of them are not very successful even in the eyes of their companies, because they're not taken seriously. And I think whether you work for a company or you work for an agency, you really have to know the company well, because otherwise you won't be taken seriously. I think that it's key to really be involved and not just look at the peripheral part of the business.